it's possible to get people together on the same screen who would never sit together in the same room. And so I think that, coupled with the fact that people are likely to be more relaxed because they're in their own home or in their own office, that really helps. I'm a solicitor, although I'm not practicing now. I stopped practicing 2 years ago. I just concentrated on mediation. But being a solicitor or a barrister is different. It's conducting the law from the point of view of just representing a client, or the solicitor who's the representative on a transaction or a piece of litigation, and the barrister works in conducting the case, usually in court, but also by giving specific advice on a particular point.
Yeah, so you would say, I mean, it falls under the general umbrella of alternative dispute resolution, right? So perhaps more specifically, how does mediation differ from other forms of alternative dispute resolution?
Well, the main difference is that in mediation, you're not looking for a decision from the mediator. The mediator is a facilitator who helps the parties come to their own conclusion. Arbitration and adjudication are forms of ADR where a decision is made by the arbitrator or the adjudicator.
Right. So perhaps what would be interesting for our listeners is to maybe understand why you decided to go down this route of being a mediator rather than an arbitrator, or you did mention that you were a solicitor, or like why you moved away from being a solicitor into mediation.
Okay, well, I've been a transactional property solicitor for 25 years when I qualified as a mediator. So that's now 11 years ago. And I found that what I'd been doing in helping clients to complete a transaction was in a collaborative way, getting the parties together around the table, if necessary, to do the deal. And this was non-confrontational, non-adversarial, and I felt that skill set particularly suited me to becoming a mediator. I only heard about mediation a year or so before I qualified, and that was in the depths of the recession in 2008, 2009. Yeah, I've been a mediator for 11 years. I continued acting as a transactional solicitor for the first 9 years of those 11 years, and then I found that the mediation was expanding and growing, and the property work was getting in the way, and also I felt that I'd done enough of that type of work.
So that actually would tie in very nicely to a question that we've received on our Instagram. So someone asked, how easy is it to move from being a solicitor to a mediator? And a follow-up question to that was, and can you practice both simultaneously?
Well, I did for 9 years. I practiced as a consultant the first 9 years of my mediation career. But there comes a point when I felt it's actually not productive to do both, because being a mediator requires a concentration in preparation, and then on the day, if it's a whole day mediation, you have to concentrate 100% on what you're doing at that time, and you can't run a transaction whilst you're doing that. You have to switch off from your property work, and because transactional work now is so time intensive, it's not good enough to be out of contact for a whole day. So I decided that I would wind down my property work.
Okay, so you would say that while it is possible, you wouldn't advise it?
I would advise that when you start training as a mediator, the standard thing we all say is don't give up your day job. Because when you qualify as a mediator and you start looking at how you can build up your work, it's advisable to keep the day job. I work with a number of mentees who are newly qualified mediators, and they go through this transitional period, which I went through as well, where you've got the qualification, you want to get on with being a mediator, but you don't have the experience.
Mm.
And so you're not going to be attractive to people as a mediator. And so I think people have to accept that it does take several years to build up the experience and the connections.
So how would you actually qualify into mediation? Is that a professional paper you have to take? Is there like a body of mediators that you get accepted into? What is the actual process into mediation?
Well, there are a number of different mediation providers and trainers, and you do your homework by checking not only the sort of course that they run, so the amount that you want to pay, because there's quite a big range in fees, and the object of the exercise is to complete their training course, to undertake 3 observations, and then apply to the mediation council to become a registered mediator. That's just the start. Because once you've done that, you then have to get work. That's where the day job comes in, because if you could afford not to give up the day job, if you could afford to put 100% of your time and effort into learning what it's like to be a mediator in practice, building up your own contacts, so that you could gradually start to get work, starting at the bottom with pro bono work. If you could afford to do all that, then you would get traction quicker. But most people can't. Most people need to have some other form of income.
Right. So how would you say that starting off from being a solicitor and moving into mediation, how would you say that being a solicitor has kind of shaped, do you think it's shaped your view as a mediator in any way? Or would you say that those 2 jobs are completely different skill sets and you use completely different ways of thinking?
I think my training and my work as a transactional property lawyer prepared me well for the mindset of being a mediator, because my whole way of thinking was, how do I help the client get the deal done?
Yeah.
How do I get people around the table to secure this deal? Representing my client's interests, but not trying to beat the other side into the ground. So I think that has prepared me well for the mindset that I have as a mediator, because my mindset as a mediator has always been, how can we help each party to compromise to the extent that they could live with a solution, which is not going to be perfect, but they can live with it and move on.
So it sounds like as a mediator, you have to be a very measured or very balanced personality. Would you say that that's the case, or do you think it's not so much a personality trait, but more skill set?
That's a good question, because I think a great deal of it, from my experience, is in your personality, is in your makeup. Yeah. If you are the sort of person who is a conciliator, is a peacemaker,
Yeah.
as opposed to somebody who loves confrontation. If you like fighting, if you like warring, if you like beating people intellectually, if not physically, then I think that mediation is not the right place for you.
Right. So another question we've received is, so this person has asked how to start as a mediator. In essence, would an LLM be a good beginning, or rather a certification in alternative dispute resolution, or are there any other means? So I think you've kind of answered this in the how to get qualified, but I suppose for this person's question, it's more if they're still, I suppose, an undergraduate, how would they begin aligning themselves to enter a career into mediation? Would you say any of those things are necessary?
Well, I think a broad approach would be good. So if you can learn the way transactions work, as well as understand the procedure in litigation, then that will give you an all-round approach, which should benefit. I mean, I've had to pick up from where I started training as a mediator. I've had to pick up the procedure to understand how that fits in with how the deal works.
Okay.
And that, I think that if you can get that knowledge and learning earlier, that would be good.
Yeah, so you would definitely say that there's no need to have an LLM in mediation, if there is even a master's in mediation.
Yeah, well, now that there are courses available at an earlier level to understand mediation and alternative dispute resolution, I think that can only help.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess moving on to more day-to-day questions. So for you as a mediator, how would you describe your approach to using mediation techniques to facilitate communication between disputants? Do you what is the process? Walk us through how you confer with these two parties to kind of clarify issues and understand and identify the underlying concerns.
Okay, well, there are two situations that I get involved, or when I get involved.
Mm-hmm.
One is before proceedings are issued, and one where it's after proceedings are issued, and they're obviously different, because if the proceedings have already been issued, the pleadings will explain how the claim is set out, and what the defense is. So those issues will already have been scoped out by that point, and so it'll be clear what each party is, how they believe their case is set out. If a mediation happens before proceedings are issued, it is sometimes the case that people mediate based on draft particulars of claim and possibly a draft defense. So there again, it's clear what the issues are. The thing that I always find fascinating is what's going on between the lines.
Yeah.
Which is not written down, because very often the case isn't about what it says it is. If that makes sense. It's about something else. It's about some interaction between the parties, some history, some bad feeling, ego, pride, emotion, which are not written in the pleadings.
So how do you sort of draw those things out and present them to both parties in a way that would allow them to, I guess, or allow you to mediate those things between both parties? Do you ever find yourself needing to do that? Because it sounds like you do.
Yeah, I have a process that I go through before the mediation, where I send out a note which sets out how the procedure works, what I can do, what I can't do, and I ask a number of questions. And the more thoroughly people answer the questions, the better.
Yeah.
Because the more we can actually work out what the issues are for mediating.
Yeah.
And that's really important for the way it works on the day. So I always have a pre-mediation meeting separately with each party, at which I will go over the answers that they gave to the questions, and also answers that they didn't give to the questions.
Okay, perhaps pulling back a little bit. So I'm sure no two mediation cases are the same, but what is the typical lifespan of the mediation? Like, what actually happens? Why don't you like walk us through what the usual process is?
Okay, well, in the ideal world, I would be instructed 2 or 3 weeks in advance of the mediation, which gives me time to prepare, obviously looking at the documents that are sent to me, having this pre-mediation meeting, working out from the briefing note that I've mentioned that I send out, what the issues are if they're not spelt out in the documentation that has been sent to me. So, again, in the ideal world, I'd have a pre-mediation meeting. If it's a property-related dispute, then usually that meeting would be on site. Now, of course, because of the current COVID restrictions, people coming out of lockdown, we're not yet sure how much people will be able to or will want to meet together on site. So, there obviously is a certain amount that can be done by video and by photos, which is not ideal, but we have to make the best of what we can. And then that all leads to further discussions in the lead up to the mediation meeting itself. And of course, at the moment we've been conducting online mediation, and I can see that continuing for the foreseeable future. There will be people who would like to meet face to face, or socially distanced face to face, and that of course is possible. But right now, I think we're in the crossover.
Yeah, so you kind of already answered my next question as to how COVID has impacted how you've needed to conduct these online mediations and online hearings. And you also answered my question about the future, like whether this will continue on. So I suppose another question I have is, as a mediator, do you find yourself having to take a very active role in persuading people to either change the way they think about a situation, or are you more of a passive, do you take more of a passive role during the discussions?
Okay, well, there's a big discussion that has been ever since I became a mediator between the evaluative way of mediating and the facilitative. And I think as I've got more experienced, I've moved more towards the evaluative, but I won't express an opinion. I won't, to use your words, persuade people to go one way or the other, because the most important thing is that it's the party's solution which they create and own if it's going to work. And this is one of the big differences between mediation and arbitration stroke adjudication. If a mediator is prescriptive and says that's the answer, you don't want to do it like that, you want to do it like this, then you're taking away the ownership of the creation of the solution from the participants. And so in that case, you might as well go for adjudication or arbitration, in my view. So the power of the mediator is to help people come to their own conclusion that they can live with, and that involves asking as many open questions as is possible to assist the parties to come to a solution which works for them. It might be that in asking all these questions, you're testing how a different set of circumstances might work, but that's very different from saying, I think you should do this,
Yeah.
because then the parties will just think, well, the mediator told us to do it. Yeah. and
So it clearly sounds
and
like you have to exercise a lot of interpersonal skills and be very good at reading people. Would you say that that's correct?
yeah, I think it's very important that you can understand what is driving people, and that's partly why I ask a lot of questions in my briefing note,
Yeah.
because I want to try and understand what is making them tick, what's making them think one way or another, and what might help to find a resolution to this. And the more that more that I ask, the more knowledge and information I've got in order to be able to assist. So it's commonly thought that mediating online makes it a little bit more difficult for us to read body language.
Hmm. Has that been the
It,
case for you?
I think that it's never quite as good
Yeah.
as being face to face with someone. But one of the things I found, which I think is a real plus in online mediation, is that it's possible to get people together on the same screen who would never sit together in the same room. And so I think that, coupled with the fact that people are likely to be more relaxed because they're in their own home or in their own office, that really helps. I've had many mediation, face-to-face mediation situations where one or other of the parties will say, there's no way I'm sitting in the same room as those so and so's, and then you have to respect that, because it's like a veto. You can't make people sit together. But with online mediation, there's less excuses
Yeah.
for avoiding sitting in your own living room,
Okay.
unless you're not well.
So I guess just a final few questions. So you mentioned that obviously with online mediation and everything, it's a lot easier to get people to come together and when they usually not want to be in the same room. Has there ever been a time where the discussion has sort of broken down to the point where you can't repair it? What happens then?
Well, there again, with online mediation, using Zoom, you have the benefit of the breakout rooms.
Right.
So if people don't want to sit on the same screen as each other, even though that doesn't mean they're together, but if they don't want to sit on the same screen as each other, they can sit in breakout rooms and just talk to their advisors, and then I, as the mediator, would shuttle between them. So there again, it's very difficult to find an excuse if you were in a face-to-face mediation and you wanted to walk out, then subject to having a chat with someone before they walk out,
Mm,
which I always try and do,
yeah.
they could go. They're free to go.
Yeah.
In an online mediation, you've got nowhere to go. if you're in your own home, okay, you can switch the machine off, but it just seems to me that's more churlish.
Yeah. So I suppose as a final question, would you have any advice for aspiring mediators, or what would be the one piece of advice you would give to people looking to enter mediation?
The first word that comes to mind is patience. You will find that whichever course you do, it's a fascinating course. It's fascinating training, because it's a different way of looking at the way people interact with each other. But you've got to be prepared to be hugely patient, because the work doesn't flow. As exciting, as interesting as it is, there's a lot of competition out there. I think, as a lot of other mediators think, that as we come out of lockdown, and as the moratorium on evicting tenants comes to an end,
Hmm.
there are going to be many more cases which are suitable for mediation, because the courts are overloaded and they've got a massive backlog. So I think that is encouraging from the point of view of mediators. But as I said earlier, don't give up your day job.
That's the number one advice. Okay, I think that's all my questions for today anyways. I don't know if Harry has any questions.
No, I think that was great. I made a list of all the ones that we asked, and I think we covered anything anyway. So yeah, that was all good from my end.
Okay, great. So that's it from us today, Roger.